consuming alcohol and drugs, well, alcohol is permitted in Judaism and Christianity, so those religions agree with each other on this particular point against Islam, except that some Christians prohibit alcohol as well. Wasn't it the Women's Christian Temperance Union that made the big campaign that established prohibition by an amendment to the U.S. Constitution for 13 years in the Prohibition era? And so the concept of prohibiting alcohol, which was, by the way, not inspired by Islam or contacts with Islam, it was self-generated, internally generated. The idea of prohibiting alcohol then is not something absent completely. And even if the majority of Christians and Jews do not prohibit alcohol, they certainly do not endorse drunkenness, and they don't generally endorse drug use either. And you will not find that the clergy hierarchy of any of those religions endorses those things. So there's rather more commonality here than difference, in fact. Gambling is similarly prohibited in Islam. Well, gambling has been also discountenanced as a big sin by Christianity. Christians have often thought gambling is a sin. That's why it's been restricted and prohibited in law frequently. Slander and backbiting are bad characteristics. They are severely reproved in Islam, but is Islam actually unique on that point? Not really. I mean, who wants to endorse slander and backbiting? I mean, these are not things that are endorsed generally. Bearing false witness is prohibited in the Bible, like in the Quran. Foul language is one that maybe doesn't bear comparison with all these others as being equally bad. And if one goes through this list and sees one personal fault that appears first of all, it's likely to be that one. Not that everyone does foul language, but I mean, it's something people might fall into easily, and a lot of people do use foul language, and that is prohibited in Islam. But is it encouraged in Christianity and in Judaism? Not really. And apostasy is not allowed in any of the religions. A Christian and a Muslim who apostatize, that's not permissible, and classically that was a capital crime. Judaism did not have the ability to enforce capital punishment against its followers because of its lack of state power, but it had a decree of haram, which meant a complete boycott, even to the extent of having a funeral for someone who had apostatized, and so the Jewish community would have nothing further to do with them, as was indeed leveled against the philosopher Baruch Spinoza. So the kind of ethical teachings and the organization of those actually is quite similar in these religions. Commonalities in spiritual practices have not to be ignored either. If you look at the way that church services look versus mosque services versus synagogue services, they don't look too much alike. They look rather dissimilar. The details are quite dissimilar and so on. Although there is such a broad spectrum in each that actually it turns out that there would be more overlapping of appearance even than people would often think. But nevertheless, the differences conceal a lot of similarity underneath. So if one looks at the purification rituals, including those using water, when a person converts to Judaism, they have to wash in the mikveh to wash away their previous life, at least symbolically. In Christianity, they have to have baptism, which may be complete immersion. In Islam, they are supposed to do a ghusl, which means a complete bath or shower where they get water all over their body if they're going to embrace Islam. So all three religions have somewhat the same ritual on that point, actually. And they have also similarities of regular daily worship. They all have weekly religious services,